your lifestyle change either. So they talk about the journey. A journey to me is you get in a car, you go somewhere and you end somewhere and you get out of the car. And this isn't a journey, this is life, this is now my life. And I think that was another process that I went through, that when I was getting to the point where I'd lost a lot of weight and I was, my weight loss was slowing up, but I thought, wow, what am I going to do now? Because am I just going to go back to my old way? But I knew I had to, this was it, everything was changed for me now.
Wow. Well, I think is really interesting about that is normally with goal setting, people say the first thing you've got to have a goal.
Yeah.
So, often people will set a weight loss target or a size or a figure on the scales that they want to see. And I think it's fascinating that you didn't have that.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that your focus has been much more on the process rather than the end result.
That's right, yeah. So it was, but when I started, I didn't realise that I was concentrating more on the process. And the issues that I faced during that process as well, obviously, throughout it, things are changing very quickly. Not only your body shape, your body size, but your mindset is changed completely. And the person I was when I started is definitely not the person I ended up with at the end. Not that I'm, a different person at all, but I am, a lot more confident in, I was always confident anyway, you know, I never had
Runs
issues.
in the family.
Yeah.
We're not shy.
Diet, no. But I was so much more confident in it, and in a business sense as well, that I felt people weren't just looking at me as the size that I was, and I felt vulnerable being that size, that they were looking at me and hearing me much more than looking at me and going, okay, she's overweight, she's probably quite undisciplined. And I wasn't at all, I wasn't any of those things. I had a problem I needed to sort out in myself, and I came to the end of it.
I have heard you use language like rock bottom. I've also heard you describe yourself as a food addict. Can you say a bit more about that?
And I find it really surprising that people are quite shocked when I talk about it being an addiction, because genuinely that's what it was. And I think, well, people who don't understand that clearly have a healthy relationship with food, and I genuinely didn't. I remember being in a situation where I was changing my lifestyle, making changes in my lifestyle in terms of food, and there were days when I would struggle. I was literally, almost crawling at myself because I wanted food, and
you're like a junkie looking for a fix.
Like it was, and that's really what it was, and I realised that when I was feeling that way, it's like cold turkey. It really is. And I didn't realise how bad it was for me until I got to that point. And so you're learning all these things as you're going along. And to overcome situations like that, I would busy myself. I would, clean in the oven, anything just to keep your mind off what was going on. And an hour would pass by. But literally, I would not live by the hour, but I was struggling. And I think you realise you're struggling, and there's a saying about something along the lines of unless you go through a struggle, there's no progress. And I think you have to go through that whole process to understand where you were to where you've come from. And they talk about focusing on looking ahead and everything, and absolutely you need to look ahead, but you need to look behind at where you've come from to understand where you are and where you're going to as well. And rock bottom, there was days when I felt it was hard, but I think the rock bottom for me personally was when I decided this is it, I've got to make that change. When that night, that day, this is tomorrow, I'm starting afresh, and that was my rock bottom. And when there's days when I was struggling, that's not your rock bottom. Your rock bottom will have been that day when you decided to make that start. We climb, we fall, that's life, and we go through life that way. And I think the day when you hit rock bottom again will be the day when you give up. And I just knew I wasn't going to give up. I was going to conquer this. And
all right, I've got to get some questions in because I want to ask so many questions about what you just said, because first of all I find it so extraordinary when you describe you're almost like clawing at yourself, like in the grip of an addiction. And you weren't at the Priory, you weren't in rehab or anything like that, but it really does. I mean, you were basically on your own, essentially, overcoming an addiction. And so even as you described, like hour by hour, the things that you did to make sure you stuck with it. But the question that begs to me is like, how do you find that inner strength? Yes,
the inner strength for me. I mean, I've got a rock at home, and he is my life. And we were at home together, and he probably didn't even realise what I was going through, but just the knowledge of having him there.
Yeah.
And then I had a fantastic network of support and people that I'd met, not even physically met, but just through message boards, and who I would have that help through them. And then friends who knew that I was wanting to change my life and who were supporting me as well and who wanted to help me. So that's what I realised. I needed to surround myself with a fantastic network. Absolutely, this had to come from me. I could sit and walk up and down the street and say to people, "You're overweight, I can help you." They're going to laugh in my face. But unless you really, really want to change, it has to come from you. The start has to come from within, and then you can make the change yourself.
Can you say a bit about reaching that point, of getting to that point of really, really, really wanting to make the change?
Well, there wasn't one eureka moment. I think I've talked about this before. There wasn't one thing that happened. There was lots of little things that happened. One of the last things that happened was I got into a car parking space. I squeezed out the car door. I scratched the car, and I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. This is now going to cost me hundreds of pounds to fix my car door, just because of the fact that you're overweight. You need to do something about it. But there was lots of things that, lots of little situations. But that was probably the last thing. And I thought, no, this is it. And I got to the end of the year, and I thought, I remember driving home every Christmas Eve from work, my last day of work, thinking, you've gone through another year and you're still overweight. And I thought, no, I'm going to change now. I'm going to make a change. And I can't even capture that specific moment, because I talk to other people who are losing weight, and I say, tell me that specific moment that it was, because I want to capture that, because you've got to anchor that and reach back for it.
Yeah.
When you are feeling difficult, and but that's the only thing I can say, is that when you are struggling, you look back and you think, well, why did you start? And when you have lost, £1, £10, £100, whatever it is you've lost, you've come so far.
Yeah.
Don't give up. You just can't give up.
So it's interesting you were talking about that moment of making the change, but the other thing you just said about how you kept going, it seems to me there wasn't one moment of making a change. It was that the change really happened in those moments when you wanted to reach for this biscuit tin, and yet you stopped yourself from reaching.
I stopped myself. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think it's the realisation that you're doing quite a lot of things out of habit without even realising you're doing it. You've got to stop and think about everything you're doing and be so much more mindful about eating and what you're doing and the habits you're in. And they talk about eating slowly and all those kind of things, but it's really what you're eating rather and really stopping yourself reaching for something that is going to pull you back again, that's going to trigger your addiction again.
You said something to me earlier about your hardest day isn't your worst day.
Yeah, your worst day is, when you're feeling it's hard, and it is hard. There was moments where I did think, I just can't do this. I need to throw the towel in. That wasn't my worst day. Your worst day will be the day you give up. And I realised that I'd hit my rock bottom when I decided to start, and I struggled. And like I said earlier, without any, you have to go through the struggle to get the progress, to understand. But your worst day will just be the day when you think, I can't do this anymore, and give up.
I love that way of thinking about it, which is no matter, and this applies not just to health and weight loss, but to anything in life, that if you're having a challenge, that however difficult it is, that it's never as bad as it's going to be until you go, all right, I'm giving in.
Yeah, isn't there a saying that the prophets say they'll never give you something that you can't physically handle?
Yeah.
There's
if God brings you to it, He'll bring you through it.
There's a saying that, and you think that as bad as it is, it's actually you're at the end. That point where it's like, I can't do this anymore. You're at the end of that struggle, and everything else is just easy after that. It really is.
So the other thing that I've noticed as we've talked about this privately is that you've said that there's no ending. It's not like you got to a certain weight and you were done. And I draw parallels in business. I remember I had a milestone a few years ago where I wanted to reach $1 million in business, and I got to that. But it's not like I went, oh, well, I'm done now. I'll go and do something else. Obviously, in business, there's always new challenges and new opportunities and new things coming along. And you've said that there's no ending to this journey.
No, there's not. And I know people do talk about dieting or losing weight as being a journey. And to me, a journey, as I've said earlier, it was like you don't get in a car, you go somewhere, and then you get out of the car, and then you go home. That isn't what this is. This is a lifestyle change for me to, you know, I have had to learn so many new things as well. So it's a whole learning process as well. So it wasn't like, you know, you start, you finish, you end. It's not a race. It's not a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not you cross the finish line, whoopie-doo, have a celebration, and then you kind of go off and do your own thing again. This is now my life. This is it.
Right, so one final piece of advice to the person who's watching this, really resonating more with what you're saying, resonating with your story, and they're actually now saying to themselves, right, I'm ready. I'm ready to make this change. What's your advice to them?
What's the killer? What's the killer question? What's the secret of the success?
Well, what's your advice to them? Like, you know, there's someone watching this right now that's like, that's me. I'm ready. I'm going to do this.
I can only tell you how I managed this. I wanted it so badly, Bernie. I really, and that was my driver. I didn't want to go back to those situations where, you know, on the outside, I might have looked happy. I was unhappy inside, and I just didn't want to go back to that situation again. I didn't know what the outcome would be for me in all of this. Obviously, I'm delighted. I'm absolutely thrilled with what I've achieved. But you've got to really have the desire. It's desire, and it's motivation, and it's willpower, and really those three things are the key to it. And you can adopt that in a business sense, I think, as well. So in anything you do in life, surely that's desire, motivation, and willpower is your key.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Tina. So that was this week's episode of Bernadette TV, and we would love it if you would come and share with us on the blog how this has impacted with you. And I'm going to put you on the spot now, but if people will come and ask questions on the blog, would you be willing to post some replies to them?
More than happy to, definitely.
That'd be fantastic.
No problem.
And if you want more like this, this is the first time I've ever talked about weight loss on Bernadette TV. Normally we're more on business topics, but hey, it's the best you can be in your business and your life. So there is a button right over Tina's head, hovering like a little crown, saying subscribe. And if you hit subscribe, the good old people at YouTube will make sure that you don't miss a single episode. So thanks so much for being here with us today and giving us the opportunity to share this with you. And we shall see you on the next episode of Bernadette TV. Bye!
Sisters, never were there such devoted sisters. Never had a chaperone, no sir. I'm here to keep my eye on her. Sharing every little thing that we are wearing. When a son of gentleman arrived from Rome, she wore the dress and I stayed home. And Lord help the mister who comes between me and my sister. And Lord help the sister who comes between me and my man.